Hi, Dr. Bell. It's March 5th, 2021. I'm Bryn Kreidel, and this is my interpersonal communication plan. I look forward to getting your feedback and your encouragement. If you'll turn to the first slide. Peterson says, the way we move into personal connection and cooperation with people is primarily through communicating. Interpersonal communication is the process people use to exchange information, feelings, and meaning. It's verbal and nonverbal. It's way more than just the language used. It includes tone of voice, facial expression, body language, and gestures. Next slide. How I listen is a large part of how I communicate. I want to listen to understand what the other person is really wanting to say. Schultz and Basinski say, listening is attending to reality, to the way things really are, with God, with others, and us. I want to learn to listen. The next slide is my disc interpretation of my public me. I'm an SD, a steady doer. I liked the phrase where they said, I'm a balance of steel and velvet. I can lead or walk beside. I need to express more feelings. I need to show more sensitivity. I can be hard to read, which causes a lot of confusion, especially in my communication. The next slide is my disc interpretation of my private me. I'm a competent, steady doer, a CSD. It's a mix of passive and active leadership. I'm good at gathering information. I always have questions, but I have self-doubt because I always feel like I never have quite enough information. I'm people-oriented, but I don't like crowds. I need, again, to learn to let my sensitivity show. Carbonell suggests that I surprise people with my enthusiasm and my emotions. The next slide is going to talk about barriers to communication. Hawkins and Clinton say, listening accurately to a client is a central counseling skill, a skill that enables the counselor to hear in stereo, attending to the client's words, as well as the surrounding relational environment. Showing my sensitivity and emotions will remove a barrier that causes confusion in my communications. This week's video, the moderator quoted, there's a direct link between the quality of communication and our quality of life. My life's rich and full, and I want to learn to communicate in a way that enriches and enhances the lives of others. My next slide, my goal is to become an active listener. I want to make a concentrated effort to suspend my own views, my thoughts, the noise in my head, my judgments. I want to allow space to let the talker's feelings and thoughts emerge. I want to value the deeper connections that come, and I want to take the risk as I am open and as I'm open to learning new things through listening. The next slide talks about reflecting. Reflecting is important practice. It's not just parroting back what someone has said to you, but it's using fresh words to restate what the talker is saying. I want to learn, as France and Michael suggest, to accurately summarize the client's thoughts and feelings. And part of this will be understanding when I get it wrong and asking for another chance to get clarity. Reflection shows empathy, and that's what the next slide is about. Empathy is understanding another person and communicating your understanding to that individual. I need to be sure to show my enthusiasm and my interest for what's being communicated so that I'm a more empathetic listener and reflector. The next slide is a picture. To be able to show emotions, I need to become aware of them. I didn't grow up in a time and place where we talked about our feelings or acknowledged them much. And for me to become more aware of emotions is going to be important for me so that I can recognize my own, and for me to learn so that I can recognize them in my clients. Franz and Michael's chapter on communicating nonverbally gave names and nonverbal cues to recognize. I need to learn that for myself so I can express them, and then I need to learn them for my clients so that I can understand them. I want to receive their information while paying attention to their emotions and feelings. Questions are critical to the counseling process, and that's what this next slide is about. Questions are necessary to gather information, and they're also an important part of the collaborative process as we make plans and set goals to move forward. I want to learn to ask better questions. Katz says, questions should be asked in the spirit of mutual inquiry, with constructive curiosity and with compassion. He also says, questions are asked in a genuinely open way with the goal of eliciting more information about the events that occurred and about how those events are perceived at present. I want to listen for clients' true answers to my questions. I want to remove my own expectations and hear what they have to say. To become skillful at questioning techniques, I'm going to need to practice. But as I do it, it will enhance my skill set, and it will encourage trust and confidence from my clients toward me and toward our process. This next slide talks about questioning techniques that were brought up in Francis Michael's book. I loved the idea of funnel sequences, where you start with a broad idea, and then as you transition to a more specific focus to gather necessary information. Then there's the inverted funnel sequence, which begins with an easily answered closed question and moves into broader responses, hopefully enhancing conversation. There are a lot of techniques. These are two that I'm going to start working on so that I can get into better conversations and more full disclosure. Listening involves knowing when to clarify, and that's the next slide. There's no need to assume that I know what someone's saying when I can be sure that I do. This week's video presentation cautions against mind reading. So I want to learn to ask clarifying questions. Peterson had some great recommendations when he said, allow a talker to develop a thought more fully, and ask talkers to put numbers to their emotions so they can see how strong their feelings are and compare them. I personally find that helpful for myself when I'm feeling overwhelmed. If I sort through things and decide what's really important, sometimes it helps me to know how to act and what can wait. Throughout these courses in this master's degree program, we've talked a lot about the integration of science and theology and spiritual formation. The ultimate integration of science, theology, and spiritual formation was Jesus emptying himself and taking on the role of a servant. So I want to be vulnerable. I want to be authentic in my sessions. I want to empty myself and take on the role of a servant. As Kim says, the majestic Son of God willingly became vulnerable in the time and space of human history. The goal is fullness of life. And that's a goal Jesus said. He said, I came so that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10:10. To recap, I want to be intentional. I want to become an active listener. I want to learn to reflect words and emotions. I want to communicate my understanding. I want to show my emotions. I want to practice questioning techniques. And I want to learn to clarify. Last slide. The best interpersonal relationships are largely intentional. They grow out of right desire, ample time, and freedom from distraction. When we listen to people, we honor them. Thank you for listening to me today.